Daniel walked slowly through the endless corridors of the alien space station, pushing his cleaning cart that rattled with brushes, cloths, and bottles of solution. To anyone passing by, he was invisible, a cleaner, nothing more. The aliens, tall and proud with their silver armor and glowing skin patterns, barely gave him a second glance. If they noticed him, it was only to move around him impatiently or to mutter about how humans were best suited for small jobs. But Daniel never argued. He nodded, smiled faintly, and kept working. He had learned long ago that speaking up did not change anything here. The station belonged to the Cathari, a race known for their brilliance in science and their arrogance in showing it. Humans were newcomers in this part of space. They were useful as laborers, assistants, or sometimes entertainers, but rarely as respected equals. Daniel knew that all too well. Still, he had a reason to stay. His daughter. Maya was 12 years, old, bright-eyed, curious about everything, and stubbornly optimistic. She lived with him in their small quarters deep in the lower rings of the station. Every morning she kissed his cheek and told him, "Don't work too hard, Dad. One day, they'll see how smart you really are." Daniel always chuckled softly at her words, though his heart ached. He wanted to believe her, but life had taught him to expect disappointment. Once, back on Earth, he had studied engineering. He had been one of the top students in his class, fascinated by energy systems and reactor design. But then tragedy struck. His wife had died in an accident, leaving him alone with Maya. Education had to wait. Jobs had to be simple and steady, and cleaning had been the only one offered when they moved to the station. So here he was, a father, a cleaner, a man hidden behind a mop. Yet Daniel's mind had not gone dull. Every day as he worked, he noticed details. A pipe that rattled too much. A vent that blew warmer than it should. A faint vibration in the walls near the reactor wing. Most people ignored such things, but Daniel's training would not let him. He stored each observation in his mind like puzzle pieces, always connecting them quietly as he worked. The aliens never cared when he tried to mention small issues. One time, he politely told a technician that a panel near the coolant pumps had a hairline crack. The technician laughed, tapping his wide forehead with a clawed finger. Human. Leave engineering to those who understand it. Daniel had only nodded, though later he fixed the crack himself with sealing paste from his cleaning supplies. No one ever knew. That evening, when he returned home, Maya was sitting at their tiny table, scribbling on a digital pad. "I'm building a ship design, Dad," she said proudly. "Look, it has extra thrusters so it can dodge asteroids." He bent down, studying her childish sketches. "That's clever. But see this line? You'll need stronger support here, or the thrusters might shake the ship apart." Her eyes widened. "You always know things like that. Why don't you tell the aliens? You could be an engineer, not just a cleaner." Daniel smiled faintly. "Sometimes people don't listen, Maya. Sometimes it's easier to let them think what they want." "But one day," she insisted, tapping her pad, "they'll realize, you'll show them." Her belief in him warmed his heart, though it also weighed on him. He did not want her to grow bitter when she learned how the galaxy really worked. The next day, Daniel's route took him closer to the reactor wing. This part of the station always made him uneasy. The air hummed with energy, and the floors vibrated beneath his boots. As he mopped the shining tiles, he noticed again the faint, irregular rhythm in the hum. To an untrained ear it was nothing, but Daniel knew what a stable reactor should sound like. It should be a steady pulse, not one that stuttered every few minutes. He frowned and paused, leaning on his mop. "It's off again," he murmured. An alien guard noticed him standing, still. "Cleaner," the guard barked. "Move along. Do not linger in restricted zones." Daniel dipped his head respectfully and pushed his cart forward, but his mind spun with calculations, memories of reactor schematics and possible causes of such vibrations. He could almost see the system in his mind's eye, the coolant pumps, the fuel rods, the energy coils. Something was not balanced. Later, that night, He mentioned it to Maya as they ate their simple meal of nutrient paste. "The reactor doesn't sound right again," he said thoughtfully. Maya tilted her head. "Shouldn't you tell someone important?" He gave a dry laugh. "They won't listen. To them, I'm just a man with a mop." She pouted, crossing her arms. "Then you should just fix it yourself, Dad." Her innocent words struck him. He couldn't fix a reactor openly, of course, but maybe there were things he could do quietly, unnoticed. In the days that followed, Daniel began carrying small extra tools hidden among his cleaning supplies. Basic spanners, sealants, and connectors he had salvaged over time. Whenever he noticed a loose valve or a leaking pipe, he fixed it silently. The aliens never suspected. They simply assumed the systems repaired themselves or credited their own technology. Daniel only smiled to himself, knowing he had kept the station a little safer. Yet the unease grew. Each day the vibrations grew slightly stronger. Each day the hum grew more irregular. Daniel's trained instincts screamed at him. Something larger was building beneath the surface. One afternoon, as he was polishing a corridor wall, two alien engineers walked by, speaking loudly in their sharp language. Daniel understood enough to catch their meaning. They were discussing unusual fluctuations in the reactor's power output, though they brushed it off as minor. His jaw tightened. Minor, they said. But Daniel knew better. Minor signs ignored could become disasters. That evening, while Maya slept, Daniel sat awake on their narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories of Earth flooded back. His professors, his projects, his wife's laughter. He thought of the fire that had taken her away, how helpless he had felt as he held Maya in his arms afterward. Never again, he promised silently. He would not let disaster take his daughter. Not here, not ever. So Daniel returned to work the next morning with new determination. He still pushed his cart and scrubbed the floors, still wore the plain gray uniform of a cleaner. But his eyes were sharper now, scanning every panel, every vent, every hum of machinery. He was invisible to the aliens, but not to the truth. And the truth was this: something was wrong with the heart of the station. And if no one else cared to see it, then he would carry the burden alone for now. Daniel's days passed in the same routine, yet his eyes caught more than anyone believed. The station's corridors were polished and bright, filled with the constant movement of alien officials, merchants, and guards. But beneath the shining surface, he saw signs that others ignored. Tiny leaks in coolant lines, warning lights that blinked once and then reset, vibrations that ran through the walls like an unseen pulse. The Cathari engineers, proud and confident, walked past these flaws without a second glance. To them, human worries were simple, even laughable. Whenever Daniel mentioned anything, they brushed him aside with words sharper than their steel boots. "Cleaner," one engineer snapped when he tried to warn her about the strange humming near the reactor. "Do not insult us with your ignorance. You clean floors, we manage power." Daniel had bowed his head politely, though inside his chest a knot tightened. Back in his quarters that evening, Maya listened carefully as he described the exchange. Her big brown eyes narrowed with frustration. "They're arrogant, Dad. Just because you push a cart they think you're not smart, but you are smarter than them." He smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. "Sometimes the galaxy works like that, Maya. Some people judge by uniforms, not by ability. But what if the reactor gets worse?" she asked, lowering her voice. "What if something bad happens?" He hesitated before answering. "Then I'll do what I can. For you. Always." Those words became his silent oath. The next day, Daniel's cleaning route took him once again into the reactor wing. He always hated this part of the station, not because of the work, but because of what he sensed there. As he scrubbed the walls, the hum of the reactor grew louder in his ears. He paused, pressing his palm against the cool metal. It wasn't his imagination. The rhythm was off, a steady beat broken by irregular tremors. Daniel glanced around. The alien guards nearby didn't notice. The technicians were busy arguing over readouts, never looking at the walls themselves. He whispered under his breath, "It's getting worse." Later, when he walked past the coolant pumps, he saw a faint mist in the air. Most people would think it was only condensation, but Daniel bent closer, eyes narrowing. He recognized the faint smell, sharp and metallic, coolant gas. It meant a leak. His instincts screamed at him to act. He reached into his cart, pretending to pull out a rag. Instead, he slid a small tube of sealant from its hidden compartment. With practiced ease, he patched the crack where the mist leaked, pressing hard until the seal hardened. The mist vanished. No alarm sounded. No one noticed. Daniel sighed in relief, but it was short-lived. One crack meant more stress elsewhere. This wasn't an isolated issue. It was part of something larger. That night, sleep refused to come. Maya lay curled on her bed, dreaming peacefully, but Daniel sat awake at the small table. He replayed every sound, every vibration, every warning sign. His engineer's mind assembled the pieces into a chilling picture. The reactor was unstable, not yet critical, but heading that way. He closed his eyes and thought of his wife. He remembered the day she had been lost in that terrible accident back on Earth. The helplessness, the fire, the screams. He had promised himself that he would never stand idle in the face of danger again. But what could he do now? He was only a cleaner. The question haunted him until dawn. In the days that followed, Daniel noticed more failures. One morning he saw a control panel flicker, showing a spike in energy output before resetting. The alien technician nearby shrugged, muttering something about temporary feedback. Daniel clenched his jaw. Feedback like that wasn't temporary. It was a sign of unstable coils. Another day, while polishing the floors, he overheard two Cathari officers discussing unusual power fluctuations. Their voices carried arrogance, as though the problem was beneath their concern. "The reactor is strong," one said. "Even if there is imbalance, it will adjust." Daniel's hands tightened on the mop handle. Adjust? Reactors didn't adjust on their own. They required balance, maintenance, and care. If left alone, imbalance grew into catastrophe. Back in his quarters, Maya saw the worry on his face. "It's worse, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "The signs are all there. The coolant lines, the coils, the vibrations. It's like a storm building behind a wall. If the wall cracks..." She shivered. "Can't you tell someone?" "I've tried. They won't listen." Maya slammed her small hand on the table. "Then make them listen." Her fire reminded him so much of her mother that for a moment, his chest ached. He leaned forward, resting a hand on hers. Sometimes the only way to make people listen is to act quietly, carefully. Her eyes softened. "I believe in you, Dad." Those 4 words carried him through the next day. Daniel began keeping a hidden record. Each evening after his shift, he sketched diagrams on scraps of old data sheets, mapping the reactor's condition as best he could from his observations. Lines, arrows, and notes covered the pages. He studied them late at night, trying to find patterns, trying to predict when the tipping point would come. He knew he couldn't solve the entire problem alone, but he could delay it. Each small fix he made, a sealed leak, a tightened valve, a cleaned vent, bought a little more time. Time he hoped would be enough. But time was running out. One afternoon, as he passed near the main reactor chamber, he felt the floor vibrate so strongly that his knees shook. The sound in the walls was louder, harsher. His heart pounded. If the aliens noticed, they gave no sign. Daniel whispered to himself, "They're blind." That evening, Maya noticed his silence at dinner. "You're scared?" she said softly. Daniel looked at her, his brave little girl who had already endured so much. He couldn't lie. "Yes, but fear is not weakness, Maya. Fear is what makes us careful. It's what keeps us alive." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then promise me you'll be careful. Promise you'll come back to me." I promise, he whispered, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. In the following week, the station prepared for a grand celebration, an alien festival of light. The Cathari decorated the upper rings with banners and glowing crystals, inviting visitors from nearby systems. To Daniel, it was bitter irony. They danced and celebrated while the heart of the station faltered, but perhaps fate had a cruel sense of timing. For while the aliens filled their halls with music, deep within the reactor chamber, the storm continued to build. And Daniel, the invisible cleaner, knew that soon, very soon, his quiet warnings would no longer be enough. The day of reckoning was coming. The celebration had filled the station with noise and color. Music echoed through the upper halls, glowing crystals lit every corridor, and the alien crowds danced in perfect rhythm. Yet deep in the reactor wing, far below the laughter, the sound was different. It was harsher, broken, and dangerous. Daniel felt it before anyone else. The hum of the reactor, once steady and deep, now roared unevenly like a heartbeat out of control. As he pushed his cleaning cart along the narrow walkway, the vibrations in the floor nearly rattled his bones. He stopped, gripped the rail, and listened. "This is it," he whispered to himself. His pulse quickened. The storm he had feared was no longer coming. It was already here. An alarm shrieked through the halls, red lights flashing across the reactor wing. The aliens nearby froze, their expressions shifting from arrogance to sudden fear. Technicians rushed to their stations, shouting at one another in panic. Coolant pressure dropping. One cried, "Energy output climbing." Another shouted back. The entire chamber filled with confusion. Daniel stood among them, ignored as always, though he could see the truth clearly. The system was collapsing. He should have run. That was what everyone else was doing. Guards ushered civilians away, engineers scrambled out of the control room, and even high-ranking officers barked contradictory orders before fleeing. But Daniel's feet didn't move toward the exits. Instead, he pushed, his cart closer. His heart pounded, not with fear for himself, but for Maya. She was somewhere on the station, laughing with friends or studying in their small quarters, completely unaware that in minutes the entire place could become a blazing grave. He couldn't let that happen. "Dad?" The voice startled him. He turned to see Maya standing at the edge of the walkway, wide-eyed, clutching a small comm device. She must have followed the alarms. "Maya," he said sharply, "go back to our quarters. Now." She shook her head stubbornly. "No! I knew something bad was happening. You need me." He wanted to argue, but there was no time. The reactor chamber shook violently, sparks flying from the overhead lights. Panels burst open, spilling wires and smoke. The crisis was unfolding faster than he had feared. Inside the control room, alien engineers struggled with glowing panels, but their hands trembled and their voices cracked. "The system won't respond," one shouted. "The safety override is locked out," cried another. Daniel pushed past them, ignoring their shouts of, "Cleaner, get out!" He scanned the readings with quick eyes. He understood them instantly. Years of study on Earth rushed back into his mind as though it had never left. The reactor's coolant pumps had stalled. Fuel rods were overheating. The energy coils, overstressed, were seconds away from collapse. "There's no time for debate," Daniel muttered. He turned to Maya, who clutched the comm tightly. "Listen to me, sweetheart. Stay close, and do exactly what I say." Her chin lifted. "I will." Daniel grabbed tools from his cart, things no engineer would ever use in a crisis. A wrench dulled by years of scrubbing, sealing paste meant for cracked walls, spare connectors he had hidden away. To others, it looked like junk. To him, it was hope. He pried open a floor hatch and crawled into the maintenance crawl space, Maya right behind him. The heat was overwhelming, sweat soaking his uniform, but he forced himself onward. "This way," he said, his voice steady. "The main pumps are close." They reached the coolant valves. One was cracked, coolant spraying in bursts that hissed against the walls. Daniel sealed it with his paste, pressing until the leak stopped. The pressure reading dipped back into the safe zone, though only barely. "Good," he muttered. "That's one problem slowed." Maya's voice trembled, but she kept speaking. What next, Dad? Daniel wiped his forehead, already planning. The coils. If they overload, everything goes. He crawled deeper into the reactor's guts, moving faster now. Above him, the alarms wailed louder, echoing through every corridor of the station. The aliens had lost control. Only chaos remained. Daniel reached the energy coils, glowing dangerously hot. The metal around them hissed, warped by heat. One coil vibrated violently, on the verge of tearing itself apart. He set his wrench against the stabilizer bolt and twisted with all his strength. It barely moved. He gritted his teeth, pushing harder, his arms trembling. "Dad, you can do it!" Maya's voice urged, full of desperate faith. With a final grunt, the bolt turned, locking the coil tighter. The vibration slowed, though the heat still poured off in waves. Daniel sagged against the wall, catching his breath. "That's two," he whispered. "But we're not done." Back in the control room, alien engineers shouted for evacuation. One officer slammed a fist on the console. "The reactor is lost. Seal the chamber and abandon the station." "No," Maya cried, her voice echoing. From the crawl space, the aliens turned in surprise to see a small human girl standing defiantly, her comm linked to her father. "He's fixing it. My dad can save us." The aliens scoffed, though fear flickered in their eyes. "Your father is a cleaner," one sneered. "What can he do that our technology cannot?" As if to answer, the alarms shifted tone. The reactor's power output steadied slightly, no longer climbing as fast. The aliens froze. What just happened?" one whispered. Maya lifted her chin. "My dad happened." Deep inside the reactor, Daniel reached the final system. The pressure vents. They were stuck shut, trapping heat inside. If they didn't open, the core would rip itself apart. He found the manual lever, jammed with rust and age. He gripped it, with both hands, straining until his muscles burned. It didn't budge. "Come on," he whispered through gritted teeth. "For Maya. For everyone." The metal groaned, resisting. His body screamed in pain, but he refused to let go. Sweat poured down his face. His breath came in ragged gasps. Maya's voice echoed through the comm, steady and strong. "You can do it, Dad. I believe in you." Something inside him ignited, strength born of love and desperation. With a roar, he pulled harder than ever before. The lever broke free, slamming downward. The vents opened. Steam roared out, flooding the chamber with white mist. The pressure reading dropped sharply. Daniel collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. He had bought precious seconds, but the danger wasn't gone. The system was still unstable, still teetering on the edge. One wrong step and everything would ignite. Daniel forced himself up, grabbing his comm. "Maya, guide me. Watch the readings on the console and tell me where the spikes are." Her small fingers flew over the controls, eyes wide but steady. "Top left coil is still too hot. Pressure climbing again." He adjusted valves, sealed cracks, rerouted power with jury-rigged connectors. Sweat stung his eyes, but Maya's voice anchored him. Every time she shouted a new number, he trusted her completely. Together, father and daughter fought the storm. Minutes dragged like hours. The alarm screamed. The reactor shuddered. But slowly, painfully, the numbers began to steady. At last, the core stopped climbing. The violent vibrations calmed. The walls stopped shaking. The alarms dimmed, their shrill cries replaced by silence. Daniel slumped to the floor, exhausted. He had done it. Against all odds, he had stopped the runaway cascade. Maya crawled to his side, throwing her arms around him. "You did it, Dad!" He hugged her tightly, his chest still heaving. "No, Maya. We did it." Above them, in the control room, the aliens stared in stunned silence. Their systems showed stability where there had been chaos. Their arrogance had failed them. Their invisible cleaner had saved their station. And though the reactor still needed full repair, one truth was now undeniable. Without Daniel, they would all be dead. The silence that followed the reactor's near collapse was heavy. For a moment, Daniel thought his ears were broken after the endless alarms, but then he realized the station was holding. The terrible roar had stopped. The ground no longer shook. The walls, once rattling with violent energy, were steady again. Maya clung to him, her small arms tight around his neck. "Dad, you did it. You really did it." Daniel hugged her back, but he knew this was not victory. Not yet. The reactor was stable only for the moment. The damage was deep, and he could feel it, like a wounded beast ready to lash out again. He pulled away gently and looked into her determined eyes. "We're not finished. If we stop now, the core will break loose again in minutes. We have to push through." Maya nodded firmly, as though she were older than her years. "Then we'll keep going." Inside the control room, the alien engineers finally dared to speak again. Their voices were sharp, panicked, and uncertain. "The human must be removed from the chamber," one officer barked. "He's interfering." Another snapped back. "Interfering? Look at the readings. He's holding it together better than we are." The commander, a tall Cathari with silver markings down his face, glared at the screens. His pride fought against the truth flashing in front of him. He wanted to order Daniel away to pretend their technology was flawless. But even he could not deny what he saw. "Let him continue," the commander growled. Daniel crawled deeper into the maintenance tunnels, every step burning his muscles. The heat inside the reactor's guts was suffocating. Sweat soaked his uniform, dripping into his eyes, but he pressed forward. Ahead, he reached the secondary coolant chambers. Pipes ran like arteries through the walls, many trembling under immense pressure. One pipe had already burst, spraying scalding steam across the narrow space. He raised his arm to shield Maya. "Stay back." She obeyed, though her voice quivered. "Can you fix it?" Daniel studied the damage quickly. The automatic regulators had failed, leaving the pipes to strain against impossible loads. He had no proper tools, no replacement parts. But he did have his wits, and his stubborn will. He pulled from his cart a length of flexible tubing he had kept hidden, salvaged from old supply crates. It wasn't designed for reactors, but it could redirect flow in an emergency. He fitted it into place, with trembling hands sealing both ends with paste and clamps. The hiss of escaping steam softened, then stopped. The pressure readings dipped slightly. Not much, but enough to buy more time. "Good," Daniel muttered, catching his breath. One more step forward. Above them, the station shook again. The partial fix had slowed disaster, but the reactor was still climbing toward instability. The energy coils were overheating faster than the coolant could calm them. Daniel forced himself to think clearly. "Maya, check the readings from the control room. Tell me where it's breaking worst." She raised the comm, her voice steady despite fear. "Top coil is red, it's going crazy, and the main vent is almost closed again." Daniel swore under his breath. The vents had jammed once more. If they stayed shut, all the heat he had just redirected would slam back into the core. He crawled toward the vent system, his knees scraping against the hot metal floor. His vision blurred from exhaustion, but he pressed on. At the end of the tunnel, he found the manual release wheel, massive, rusted and nearly fused with age. He gripped it with both hands and twisted. The wheel groaned but refused to budge. His muscles screamed, "Dad!" Maya's voice broke, watching him strain. He closed his eyes, drawing strength from her presence. "This station has thousands of lives on it, Maya. I won't let them die, and I won't let you lose your home." With a final roar, he forced the wheel to turn. The vents creaked open and steam poured out in a furious rush. The temperature gauges dropped slightly. Daniel sagged forward, his chest heaving. "That's better, but it's not over." In the control room, the aliens stared at the screens as the reactor's numbers flickered between collapse and stability. The commander clenched his fists. "He's delaying the inevitable," one engineer muttered. "Maybe," said another, "but he's delaying it longer than we ever could." The commander growled low in his throat. Pride and fear battled in his eyes. Daniel wasn't done. He forced himself to the upper coils, climbing through ladders and crawl spaces slick with heat and smoke. Each rung felt heavier than the last. His arms shook, his lungs burned, but he kept climbing. Maya followed close, her small voice guiding him with updates from the console. "Power spike in coil 3, she shouted. He reached coil 3 and saw the problem instantly. The stabilizer plates had cracked, letting the coil shake dangerously. If it broke completely, the core would spiral into meltdown. He had nothing designed to fix this. No stabilizers, no reinforced plates. But he did have metal panels scavenged from his cart, once meant for patching walls. He pressed them against the coil, bolting them in place with trembling hands. The fit was imperfect, but it steadied the violent shaking. The readings leveled. Not safe, but stable. Daniel collapsed against the wall, every bone in his body screaming for rest. "Dad, the numbers are better," Maya whispered through the comm. "You're saving us." His lips curved into a weak smile. Not yet, almost. Then came the final warning. The reactor's core let out a deep, terrible rumble. Lights across the station flickered, entire decks going dark. The control room. Screens flashed red across every system. "Core breach imminent," the computers announced in cold, robotic tones. The aliens panicked, shouting orders that no one obeyed. Some fled the control room entirely, abandoning their posts. The commander's voice broke as he roared for them to stay, but fear had already won. Only Daniel and Maya pressed forward. Daniel reached the heart of the reactor. The control rods, glowing with deadly light, vibrated violently in their chambers. They were seconds from tearing free. He stared at them, his mind racing. "If the rods go, the whole station goes with them." Maya's voice trembled. "What do we do?" He took a deep breath. "There's only one chance. I have to force them back manually." "That's too dangerous," she cried. He knelt before her, his face tired but unshaken. "Maya, listen to me. If I don't do this, everyone dies. You die, and I will not allow that." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely. "Then I'll stay with you." He placed the comm in her hands. "Guide me. Tell me the numbers. Keep me steady." He climbed onto the reactor platform, gripping the manual override lever attached to the rods. The heat was unbearable, his skin burning through the thin fabric of his uniform. He pulled with all his strength, but the rods barely shifted. Maya's voice cut through the roar. "They're moving, Dad. A little more." He pulled harder, his vision blurring, his muscles tearing with effort. The rods crept back into place. Sparks rained down from above. The entire platform shook as though the reactor itself resisted him. "Almost there," Maya screamed. With a final desperate cry, Daniel forced the lever down fully. The rod slammed into position. The roar stopped. The vibrations ceased. The gauges, once climbing toward doom, fell into stable green. The reactor was safe. Daniel collapsed onto the platform, gasping for air. Maya ran to him, throwing her arms around his shoulders. "You did it, Dad. You really saved us." He hugged her tightly, every ounce of his strength gone. "No, Maya. We saved them. Together." Above them, the control room fell silent. The aliens stared at the readings in disbelief. Their arrogance was broken, their pride shattered. The cleaner they had ignored, the human they had mocked, had saved their entire world. And in that moment, Daniel was no longer invisible. The reactor chamber was quiet now. No alarms, no flashing lights. Only the steady hum of a stable system. For Daniel, the silence was almost louder than the chaos had been. He lay on the platform, sweat pouring down his face, his body trembling. With exhaustion, Maya clung to him, her small hands gripping his arm. "It's over, Dad. We made it." Daniel smiled faintly, though his chest heaved with every breath. "Yes, Maya. It's over. For now." He wanted to close his eyes, to rest, but footsteps echoed through the chamber. When he looked up, he saw alien soldiers and engineers filing back into the room. Their expressions were wide-eyed, a mix of shock, shame, and disbelief. At the front stood the commander, his silver-marked face tense. He looked at Daniel for a long moment, his pride wrestling with what he had witnessed. Finally, he spoke in a voice that carried through the chamber. "This human saved us all." The words hung in the air. None of the Cathari argued. They couldn't. The evidence was right before them. The station was still alive. The core still intact, because of the man they had mocked as nothing more than a cleaner. One engineer, the same who had once told Daniel to leave engineering to the professionals, lowered her head in shame. "I did not listen," she admitted quietly. "And yet he saw what we did not." Daniel struggled to stand, leaning on Maya for support. He didn't bask in their words, didn't smile with pride. He was too tired for that, and pride was never his reason. He looked only at his daughter. "Are you all right?" he asked her, softly. She nodded quickly. "I'm fine, Dad. Because of you." Her eyes shone with something more powerful than any recognition from the aliens. Love and belief. For Daniel, that was enough. The commander stepped closer, his silver armor clinking with each movement. He studied Daniel with a gaze that, for once, carried no arrogance. Instead, there was something else: respect. "Human," he said firmly, "you prevented a catastrophe that would have destroyed not just this station, but thousands of lives. You acted when our own engineers failed." "Why?" Daniel met his eyes, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Because my daughter lives here. Because innocent lives don't deserve to be lost to arrogance or neglect. Because someone had to." The commander's jaw tightened, but he gave a slow nod. "You have done what none of us could. From this day forward, you will not be seen as just a cleaner. You will be honored as a savior." The aliens behind him murmured in agreement. Some even bowed their heads, a gesture rare among the proud Cathari. In the days that followed, news of the event spread across the station. Everywhere Daniel walked, heads turned. Aliens who once brushed past him now stepped aside respectfully. Some saluted. Others whispered his name as though he were a legend walking among them. Yet Daniel never let it change him. He still pushed. His cart still cleaned the halls, still lived in the same small quarters with Maya. But now, when he passed through the corridors, no one ignored him. The guards who once barked at him now nodded with respect. The engineers who dismissed him now asked for his advice. Maya, of course, loved every moment. She walked proudly at his side, grinning at the astonished looks. "See, Dad? I told you they'd realize one day." Daniel chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. "Yes, Maya, you were right. But recognition was not the greatest reward. What mattered most was the safety of the station, the knowledge that his daughter would sleep in peace without the shadow of disaster hanging over her. That was the true victory." One evening, as they sat together in their quarters, Maya asked a question that lingered in Daniel's heart. "Do you think Mom would be proud of you?" Daniel's throat tightened. He thought of his late wife, her laughter, her strength, and the way she had always believed in him. He closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "Yes," he whispered. "I think she would be." Maya smiled, softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I know she is." The Cathari commander visited Daniel not long after. He entered their modest quarters with no guards, no ceremony, just quiet respect. "You saved not just our lives, but our pride as well," he admitted. "We were blind, and you opened our eyes. I offer you a place among our engineers with full honors and privileges." Daniel considered the offer. It was tempting, the recognition of his skills, the chance to work openly instead of in secret. But then he looked at Maya, sitting cross-legged with her digital pad, sketching designs. "For ships." He shook his head gently. "I thank you, Commander, but I don't need titles. I only need a safe home for my daughter. That is all I ask." The commander was silent for a long moment before bowing his head. "Then you shall have it. From this day forward, you and your child will always be under our protection." Word of Daniel's choice spread as quickly as the story of his heroism. Many aliens were puzzled. Why would he refuse honor? Why would he remain a cleaner when he could rise higher? But those who watched him closely began to understand. It was not about glory. It was about responsibility. About love. About a father's promised to protect his child no matter the cost. And in that understanding, respect grew deeper than any title could give. Weeks passed, and the station returned to its daily rhythm. The festival resumed, though more subdued than before. The reactor was repaired fully with proper tools and teams, but Daniel's intervention remained the reason it was still standing at all. Sometimes when he worked, aliens would stop him to thank him personally. A merchant pressed a gift into his hands. A young Cathari child bowed shyly before him. An engineer asked for guidance on how to notice the little things that matter most. Each time, Daniel responded with humility. I only did what had to be done. But to Maya, he was more than a hero. He was her father, the man who had proven to the entire galaxy what she had always known, that he was capable of greatness, even if no one else believed. One night, as they walked home from the observation deck, Maya pointed at the stars through the station windows. Do you think they're talking about you out there? On other worlds? Daniel chuckled softly. Maybe. Stories travel fast. But it doesn't matter if the stars know me, Maya. What matters is that you're safe. She squeezed his hand tightly. I am. Because of you. In time, the tale of the human cleaner spread beyond the station. Other stations, other worlds, even distant systems heard of the man who had saved a reactor with nothing but his wits, his courage, and his determination to protect his daughter. Some called him the silent engineer. Others called him the protector of the weak. But Daniel never sought those names. To him, he was simply a father who had done what fathers must. And though the galaxy now looked at him with newfound respect, Daniel remained the same, quiet, steady, and invisible, only to those who had not yet learned the truth. Because now, whenever he walked the halls with his cart and his mop, people no longer saw just a cleaner. They saw the man who had saved them all, and they never underestimated him again.